Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. My name is Laura McGinnis, and I am talking to you from Eugene, Oregon. This is Something to Talk About Live, and this is with PFLAG National. I want to bring in our host for today and every day, Jean Marie Nevada.
Thank you so much, Laura. I am super excited to be here and really, really excited to talk to you today. We are going to have another one of our really great conversations. Today, we are going to talk about how to celebrate Pride when you are not yet out, which actually is a pretty big challenge for a lot of people, unfortunately. But I am never by myself because it would be bad to trust me alone for this much time. So I have two of my very, very good friends and colleagues coming in with me. First, Jamie Curtis, the Director of Chapter Engagement at PFLAG National, and Jamie Henkel, the Learning and Inclusion Manager at PFLAG National, otherwise known as the other half of my team. We are the partners in crime. So I'm really excited to be talking about this. So let's get into today's conversation. So the article that we are using today is How to Celebrate Pride Quietly When You Are Not Totally Out. It's written by S. Bear Bergman, and it appeared in Vice as part of the Queers Built This series, which is a multimedia project. So if you want to get a link to the article and the questions that we are going to be using, please make sure that you go to straightforequality.org and click on discussion series towards the bottom of the page. And definitely check out this article and the other multimedia pieces that go with it. It is really, really a brilliant piece and a lot of great connections to things. So, my friends, as we start today's conversation, I did a little bit of homework before this, which is always a good idea. And when we look at people being out, this is what we know. So right now, among American adults, about 46% of them say that I am in the closet in the workplace. That's according to the Human Rights Campaign. And also according to HRC, about 28% of Americans who are adults say I'm not out in any part of my life. And when we look at youth, the statistics change a little bit, but it's interesting how things break down. And I think this will give us something to talk about, which is that about 91% of youth who are LGBTQ identified between 13 and 17 years old say, 91% say I'm out to my friends, 61% say that I'm out at school, and 56% say I'm out at my family. So there's a really big disparity there between the places where people might be out. So with that, I'm going to stop running my mouth and actually ask you both, because we all identify a little bit differently and we all come to this differently. How did this article make you feel? Because I think it was kind of a tough article to read just from the beginning, realizing what we were dealing with. So did it raise new issues for you? Did it not raise new issues? Were there any surprises about how you felt about the article? And Jamie, I want to hear from you because you are, running PFLAG's chapter engagement program. So you're hearing a lot of stories out there. So tell us about how you were feeling about this.
Yeah, I was reading the article and I was reminded of all of the emails we're all getting these days that with subject lines like Pride is different this year. And because we can't celebrate in person, we've all seen those emails. We've all sent those emails. But it definitely made me think about how Pride is different this year than other years. One, we can't celebrate in person. Two, there are a lot of important racial and social justice issues we're talking about this year that maybe we haven't been talking about during other Prides. So there's a lot of great conversation going on. But it was a reminder to me that when we talk about Pride and celebrating Pride, for some people, they cannot publicly celebrate. And this can be a challenging time when maybe people feel a part of a community, but they can't stand up and wave their rainbow flag or, hug people and be there with people either in person or even, virtually. They can't stand up and say I'm a part of this community. So, it definitely it was a good reminder, I think, that there are a lot of people that are a part of our community, but can't speak up and can't feel as embraced as we would want them to. And it reflects what we're seeing from chapters. We have about 130 chapters that are meeting virtually right now, which is a big change. I don't know that we had any that were meeting virtually 4 months ago. So, this is a big change, but people are seeing that people are connecting with them who maybe haven't connected before because they're able to now, because there is a little bit more anonymity, or they don't have to go somewhere to a location. But we do see people struggling. The young people, as you were sharing in the statistics, who are maybe not out to their families, but given the circumstances are sort of forced into being at home or being in an environment around people that they're not out to. That is definitely a challenging thing. And, so we're seeing that in our chapter network, and just people in general who are LGBTQ, even if they are out, but are maybe alone and feeling a little bit isolated.
Yeah, thank you. And for those of you who might not be familiar with it, we launched a project called PFLAG Connects, which actually got our chapter network online. So if anybody is watching this and you're not out, or you're trying to come out and you need support, definitely go to pflag.org/find, so that way you can find your closest chapter. So you've got local people, but know that since meetings are virtual, there's a lot of freedom right now for people. So Henkel, talk to me a little bit about how this made you feel, because you were coming from it with some different ideas around the article. So tell me what you thought.
Yeah, and so I think that when I read it, I was coming at it from a much more individual and sort of less organizational or institutional view, which is not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the way I was reading it. And one of the things is I realized as I was looking, this is 20 plus different ideas for things that you could do to celebrate Pride basically in secret. And it just made me so immensely sad. And the reason I say that is because as a cisgender straight ally, there has never been anything in my life, anything that is a part of the way I identify, that I would need or feel the need to celebrate in secret. And it also made me so honored to be a part of PFLAG and to be a part of this organization, because it made me think about that quiet strength that LGBTQ folks have, and the fact that people are thinking about, even in this environment where I am potentially not safe, or I could be kicked out, or I could be harmed physically, they're still trying to think about, how can I live as my true self? How can I show my pride? How can I do these things? And whether it is a symbol that other people aren't going to recognize, or it's, watching shows after your family has gone to sleep, it made me immensely sad. But it also just made me honored to be a part of this conversation and a part of this movement.
First of all, thank you. Because I think sometimes when you're doing things to survive and to keep moving forward, you don't step back and think that anything that you're doing is particularly extraordinary. But it is a moment, I think, as you said, that I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about those in the community who are doing these things to make sure that people can be out, or create ways for people to be out. And that is a tremendous amount of resilience. And I appreciate, I think sometimes allies, you play a very good role for us in reminding us of those things. I could think, because when you live in a sort of a crisis state and constantly trying to fix things, you don't see that. And I think I am always really appreciative of my allies, and with both of you two being two of my very best allies, to point those kinds of things out. I think it was a very interesting article, because for me, I've been out a really long time. My first ever Pride Parade, I think, was maybe in 1991. So I've been doing, I know it's hard to believe, being 26, that I've been able to. It's amazing what we've come to. But it made me sort of step back and think about those times before I was able to actually show up. And it is a little bit of a chilling experience to think back to it, because your life does feel so different. So the second question that we floated out there, and I intentionally wanted to have allies on for this conversation, because one of the things that we talk about at PFLAG frequently is that certainly people who are LGBTQ plus identified have a coming out process, but often allies and certainly family members who just found out information also have their own coming out process too. And so coming out isn't just for LGBTQ people, it's often for friends and allies who need to get to the point of being ready to be very publicly out. We know that allies sort of land in all different places across the spectrum too when it comes to that. So the second question had to do with what was actually on this list. And I have to say, I really super love this list. And if you are listening to this and you haven't read the article, I really encourage you to do it, because there were several suggestions that I would say were very different. And a lot of them were designed for a more private pride. But some of them, I think, really elevated things that we have not talked about and that we don't talk about enough. I really love the suggestion of learning about and maybe wearing one of the symbols associated with history, like the lambda, or perhaps creating green carnations. Many people don't know that was made famous by the writer Oscar Wilde. It was actually evidence used against him in his trial to convict him of being a gay man. Or doing your own private film festival, and the suggestions are great. It mentions Marlon Riggs' Tongues Untied, which is truly a classic and important film. Jihad for Love, Una Mujer Fantástica, which is also spectacular. And it mentioned LGBTQ poets. I'd like to add Richard Blanco to that list if you're looking for someone to read. But I want to talk to both of you, and maybe Jamie Curtis, you can go first. You had a chance to look at the list. Were there things on there that really caught your attention that you wanted to bring attention to? Or were there some things that maybe you think were missed? Or do you want to expand upon any of those? And also speaking about this as an ally, how can allies maybe leverage this list too?
Yeah, thanks. As I read it, I'm always impressed when I'm reading new resources that I didn't know, or things I didn't know of. The green carnations I didn't know about. And I was like, oh, that would be a fun thing to do, stuck at home, like a fun little craft project. But reading the list, I thought about also as an ally, and Jamie Henkel and I talk about this together sometimes, is like how we can show our support to other people. So some of the things on the list would be great visual cues for other people that we are supportive. And so looking at the list also from that lens of how can we use some of these things as supportive things. And, one of the things I loved on the list was, they talk about using symbols. And some of those, it's about finding symbols that other people don't know about. And, I was talking with you too before this call about how I often do that for myself. If I'm going into a situation where I'm nervous or I'm going somewhere new, I'll write a note to myself, or I'll, wear a piece of jewelry that has meaning to me, but other people might not notice. And so I think that sometimes those symbols we give to ourselves are also really powerful. So I love that suggestion for people. But I also think, some of the parents out there watching, maybe they're still in the closet. Maybe they haven't come out to family and friends of having an LGBTQ child or loved one yet. So this list could also be used for parents and allies who are not out yet.
Thank you. And Henkel, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I thought about this a little bit, and I think that the reality is, for a lot of us, the way that we're showing our pride this year is going to be on social media. And that can be scary, because the internet is sometimes a scary place. People can be really mean from behind the anonymity of a keyboard. But I would encourage folks to really be brave, as you're thinking about demonstrating and showing pride in various ways, and thinking about ways you might be able to incorporate these items into your own list. That social media is probably where you're going to be doing that right now. So I wanted to put that out there. The other thing that I would say, and this is a story that you have both heard before, I do very much think that we all, LGBTQ folks and allies and parents of LGBTQ folks, everybody, we really do need to consider personal safety when it comes to being out. And I think that in a lot of ways, that sometimes gets left out of the sort of big public story about coming out and what that experience is like. And the story that I've shared with you both, there was a time when I was actually coming home from a PFLAG national convention a few years ago. I was in a cab, and the cab driver asked me where I was coming from and what I was doing, and sort of what my profession was and that sort of thing. And when I told him about my work at PFLAG and where I was coming from, he did actually use the phrase, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. He slowed the pace of his car to about 15 miles per hour in the city so that he could hand me a Bible verse from his glove compartment, and it made me feel really unsafe, and it made me like I was physically afraid for my safety, to the point that I demanded that he stop the car and I got out of the cab. Like, that's how unsafe he was making me feel. And that's an experience I've had a single time in my entire life, a single time. And I think it's important for all of us to remember that for some people, that is a reality for them every day. And so when we talk about the urgency of coming out and the power of coming out, like, remembering that it's not a choice or an opportunity for everybody is really important. So that's part of what this article also made me think about.
And I think that's a really great point that you make. You know, we are spending a lot of time, because we work for PFLAG, talking to people about these issues and about being out. And, you know, I know that, you know, as a member of the community, there is this push that everyone should be out, come out and show who you are, because there is a connection between knowing someone who is LGBTQ and, you know, the reduction of bias against people who are LGBTQ. And yet that remains an incredibly fragile privilege for so many people. And even for people who have the privilege of being out, it does not necessarily mean that you are safe anymore. And I don't want to make this turn negative, but I mean, 4 years ago, pulse. That's all I have to say. So spaces that should be very safe are still not very safe, and no spaces are safe right now for trans women, and particularly trans women of color. So it is very much a privilege to be out or to disclose about your identity. And I think that is a thing that as allies and as members of the community, it's critical for us to talk about and not put the same expectations on everyone universally, because that is an act of tremendous cultural blindness that I think, and we need to have that conversation. So I want to go to our last question before we go to some of the comments and questions that are coming in. And just as a reminder for anyone who is watching us live, please give us, I'm reading some of them as we go along, your comments and questions, because we're going to be talking about those in just a couple of minutes. So the last question actually had to deal with, in your opinion, for what can LGBTQ plus folks who are totally out and allies who are totally out do this month? And I'd like to actually, let's not even talk about just this month. Let's talk about year round, because everybody talks about this in June. June is an exhausting month, and we should be exhausted every month from the level of pride that we actually have. So what can people do? And I just want to throw one out that's really important to me. And Jamie, Jamie Henkel, you actually queued this up for us already, which is about how you act online. I think it's really easy in June to change your profile picture rainbow or put your, put the frame around it. But what are you doing the other 11 months of the year? Because, you know, people need to see you then too. And I think social media is also, as you acknowledged, kind of a scary place sometimes. But I think we also have a responsibility, and I'm going to specifically say with our families, that when we see things not happening that are not okay, it is up to us to sometimes pick up the phone and start having some conversations, because what people see online has a tremendous influence. And just think about a young person who's seeing some of the things that a family member might be floating out there. And allies, you sometimes have the cover to have these conversations. So Jamie Curtis, what kind of things would you suggest to add to this list?
Yeah, and I totally agree. Let's cut out the whole this month thing and let's talk about it all year long. But I think one of the big roles of allies is, to your point, to educate other people. And whether that be, talking with someone about what they posted online or correcting comments. So I think those are really big things that as allies we can do. And sometimes it's easier for us and less personal to do that than it is for LGBTQ people. So that is a way we can help by being the ones that are helping to correct misinformation and educate people. One of the other things I was thinking about was to remember that it's a really big thing if someone comes out to you. And I was reading this list of things that people can do, and I was thinking that a lot of these people that are at home and are not out to the people they're living with, there might be someone out there that they did come out to. If you're that person who knows someone who came out and maybe they're not living with people that know they're out, privately reaching out to them just to check in. I think that's a great thing to do. And also, as a lot of us are doing during this time, just reaching out and checking in with other people we know that we haven't heard from. And we just want to make sure that they're okay. And that's definitely a great thing to do for Pride, and a great thing to do all year long, is to check in and see how our LGBTQ plus loved ones are.
Hinkle. Thank you. Hinkle.
So first and foremost, I'm going to say that one of the things that people who are out and allies can do to support those who aren't is vote. Vote. We have an election coming up in November. In some places, they're saying there are like dozens of thousands of less new voter registrations happening this spring than in spring of 2016. So vote, please vote. So I think that that's really important. And I think that everything that's been said already is really, really significant. And I am not the type of person that is going to like pick fights with strangers on the internet in like a comment section or anything like that. But I certainly will call my mom out if she's misusing a term. And I think that that's really important. And it's something that I can do. And it's a place where people in my life expect me to take on that role. And like, there are people in my lives that will come to me with questions about what they can do and how they can get involved and how this new word that they've never heard of. And so I think that one-on-one conversation is really important. And it's also something, I mean, we talk to PFLAGers about this all the time. The way that you create culture change, the way that you make a difference is by having conversations about your family, about your children. And it's harder now because we're not in the stands at baseball games. We're not out to dinner with friends. We're not standing in line at the bank and striking up conversations with strangers. But when we can create those conversations, I think it can be really powerful. And also vote.
Also vote. I know that Laura actually put something across the screen. If you're interested, we are going to be doing a class of PFLAG Academy Online on voting on the 30th of this month. I think she just floated up there again. Please join us if you'd like to learn more about voting issues. And with that, we are actually going to do some of the questions. But I think before we go to that, it's time to don our pride gear, my friends, to do this properly. We're ready for you. So for you who may not be able to be out, we are here to pride on your behalf. So Laura, would you be willing to come back into the conversation and give us some of the comments and questions that we've been getting? Because I have been seeing the scroll go and some of you are making me giggle. Oh, you're a mute still.
I'm just slow on the mute. Sorry about that, folks. Not as cool with my pride gear today, but I feel like I'm proud all the time. So we have been getting some fantastic suggestions from people about their favorite books, their favorite movies. But I did want to bring up a question and a comment from Katie Pearl Hartling. It's a disappointing trend of questions I've heard recently from coworkers who are not vocal allies. How do I deal with people who think I might be LGBTQ because I'm a vocal ally?
Well, here's the cool thing, Katie, and Katie is one of our PFLAG chapter leaders in Northwest Arkansas. How about my two allies here, Jamie and Jamie? You want to talk to that one? You're kind of experts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing for me, it's so disappointing to be an ally when I meet so many PFLAGers who want to introduce me to their daughters, and it's just so hard. But, I think one of the things that I often respond to people with questions, and it's interesting to me how many people make that assumption. And I think it's something that we need to educate within this space as well of, why do people assume that someone who cares about LGBTQ and family issues, why would the only people who work here be LGBTQ+? Why would allies not care about that? So, I think there's some education within our own communities that we need to do to that. But to a person who is an ally that's expressing that, I might ask them, what would be wrong if somebody thought you were LGBTQ+? Like, what's the downside to that? Like, so really sort of talking it through with people of, what's the fear of that?
Thank you. And Jamie, tell us, you teach a class on this.
Yeah, I do. And I think that what Jamie Curtis was just saying is really important. picking apart of why that is a concern to somebody, because that then puts them in a position to really be thinking about, in a complex and sort of difficult way, what they think would happen to them if people presumed that they were gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or queer. Why is that a concern? So I think that is a key component to it. But I think that one of the things that I like to do, because it does happen, just like Jamie Curtis said, it happens more often than not in my experience, where when people ask me where I work and what I do, and they're like, oh, are you queer? And when I say no, I get this sort of, okay, and if people are like, the gears are turning. But I think one of the things that, especially in the workplace, folks can do is lead with their allyship. So, as you're speaking up, as you're having a conversation, as you are trying to engage, as you are creating conversation or navigating conflict, start by saying, as an ally, I think it's really important that whatever you're talking about, whether it's a Supreme Court decision, whether it is a policy change in your office, whether it is having the pride flag fly at your company's headquarters, whatever it is, start with your allyship, because then that sort of negates that concern from the get-go if it is something that is going to prevent you from speaking up in the first place.
And it gives people something to think about. When we talk about it, we always say allies tell your story, because Jamie and I do a lot of training, and so many times people ask us, why would somebody do this if they weren't a member of the community? And that is that opportunity when allies say, it's about my kid, it's about my best friend. In the case of these two Jamies, obviously it's about their very favorite coworkers who are both on this line here to support us, Laura. Let's just face it. Thank you.
And I want to say again, it happened. And I am at a point in my life and in my career and in the work I do with PFLAG where I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Think what you want. It's cool. Stab me up with your daughter. I bet she's sweet and pretty. Fine. We'll have a great meal together. But it happened. To the point that a man that I was dating, when his mother found out where I worked, her immediate assumption was, I thought you said you were dating this girl.
And that's why you're not together anymore.
Mm-hmm. So I want to jump in with some other comments and suggestions about what you can do. And Shannon England had many, many great comments and suggestions. Yeah. But one among them, and earlier we had posted something about queer film as well, but reading queer books is always good, and there are so many lists out there that you can find. And this is something that my spouse and my partner says it's true too. Her parents always let her alone when she was reading. Didn't matter what she was reading, whatever kind of, whatever. And that's our rule with our kids. And what about you folks?
For reading was a huge one. I think that was like my connection. I always say, we had Liz-Leah Newman on a few weeks ago. Discovering her books was like the lifeline to the rest of my life. And I was one of those kids that, if I was reading, my parents were so happy. Nobody was even going to say anything to me. We were a big reading family.
Yeah, and I think both books and any other media, we're fortunate that we're in a time right now where a lot of sort of mainstream television movies, have great LGBTQ representation and characters. So it's a great time to be watching some of those, even if you're worried about your parents seeing your Netflix queue or things like that. There's a lot of great stories out there that are pretty mainstream.
Like everything on the CW, and everyone should totally watch Sabrina too.
But to sort of bring it back to the article, that was another one of those things that in multiple places, the author was saying, if you're nervous, here's how to erase something from the queue of your Netflix of recently watched, or here's how to delete your browser history if you've just listened to a podcast. And I think that makes me sad. But if you are somebody that is at home and isn't out or is in a place that does not feel particularly safe, there are still options. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Well, we are almost out of time. So I want to thank both of my Jamies, and thank you, Laura, so much for being with us. And I'm going to put on my last Pieta of Pride swag to say goodbye to everybody, because I'm off. Oops. Oh. So I would like to thank everybody for being part of Something to Talk About today. We here at PFLAG are celebrating Pride with you, whether you are out or not. And if you are on your way, please reach out because we would love to help you in your journey, whether you are a member of the community or a family member or an ally. As we always say at the end of the show, run fast, laugh hard, and be kind. It is the most important thing. My name is Jean Marie Navetta. This has been Something to Talk About. We will be back again next Thursday with a new great conversation, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Please visit us at pflag.org, and happy Pride Month, everyone.